really freaked me out when I discovered the first one. Not that it doesn't now, but the first was a massive shock to the system. I mean, who wouldn't be downright horrified at the sight of a dead girl dangling from a tree branch? The one who put her there. That's who. I was 18 when I came across the mutilated corpse. That day will always stick out in my mind. It was ground zero. The catalyst for the demented circus act that my life would devolve into. Little did I know, it would all be downhill from there. Cheer up, dude. Being held back isn't the end of the world. Just means you get more opportunities to hit on that cute sophomore you've been crushing on. Jacob smirked, nudging my arm. I sighed. It's not the end of the world, but it might as well be. While all of you get to prance across that stage, I'll be stuck shoveling shit in the pig pen. Jacob stayed silent. A breeze swept through the air, rustling the crisp brown and yellow leaves that littered the ground. He knew I was right. I was the farmer's son, and my father viewed me as nothing more than free labor. An otherwise useless, good-for-nothing piece of equipment to be tossed to the curb once I lost my value. And with how abhorrent my grades were, I wasn't exactly proving him wrong. I mean, look on the bright side, maybe you can... Jacob trailed off, and I nearly bumped into him. What gives, man? You can't just stop right in front of me like that, I grumbled, beginning to step around him. Jacob suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. A pang of fear jolted through my chest. Jacob was a thin, bony boy with less muscle than SpongeBob SquarePants. Nevertheless, he maintained a grip so tight around my wrist that I thought it might snap. Before I could ask him what in the world he thought he was doing, he pointed to a tree in a nearby clearing. That's when I noticed the body. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Adrenaline surged through my veins as my fight or flight began to kick in. Though every synapse in my brain screamed at me to run, I found myself glued to the spot. Grayson! Is that what I think it is? Jacob muttered, shattering my morbid reverie. I'm pretty sure. What do we do? Should we call the cops? How has no one seen it by now? I'm gonna get a closer look, Jacob murmured as he started to trudge toward the suspended remains. I debated on leaving. I wanted to put as much distance between me and that gruesome scene as I possibly could. But in the end, my curiosity won out. I can't believe I'm doing this, I mumbled, trotting to catch up to my friend. We continued to walk through the open field until we stood directly in front of it. I don't know why, but I hadn't expected the smell. The putrid stench of rot and decay swam into my nostrils well before we reached the cadaver. It nearly made me gag from how overpowering it was. Once we were right up on it, I was really able to drink in its features. The deceased was a woman. It made me nauseous the way her corpse was softly swaying in the wind. Thin, black hair clung to her blood-spattered nightgown. I think it was white at one time, but the fabric had degraded to a deep yellow. Her brittle, pallid appendages hung limply, never to regain mobility again. But worst of all was her face. The woman's pale blue eyes were bulging from her skull. Dried blood trailed from the sockets, down her cheeks, and eventually pooled at the noose secured tightly around her neck. That was what really got me. Her eyes. I could still see the pain and fear behind each of her protruding irises, and my heart absolutely shattered for her. I couldn't stand to look any longer. Jacob, I'm calling the police. We shouldn't be here. What if the killer is hiding nearby? He turned to me, mouth still slightly agape. Yeah, the cops. You're right. Let's go. Jacob and I returned to the sidewalk where we'd first noticed the woman, while I dialed 911. The phone rang for longer than it should have before the operator's voice cut through the line. 911, what is your emergency? The woman sounded exhausted, like years upon years of 2 packs a day were whittling down her lung capacity. Hi, yes, I found a dead body. Can you send somebody to, I don't know, take her to the morgue, I guess. What is your location? Emergency services will be en route momentarily. No, coming up on the intersection of Maple Road and Cherry Street. Please hurry. The operator suddenly cleared her throat, effectively cutting me off. Pardon me, but you said the intersection of Maple Road and Cherry Street, yes? My brows furrowed. The lady on the other end of the line had dropped her reassuring facade. She sounded almost accusatory. Yeah, that's right. Sir, please continue to go about your day. Nothing is out of the ordinary at the intersection of Cherry and Maple. Services will not be dispatched. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything was normal. I'd just seen a fucking lynching victim with my own 2 eyes, and the operator was telling me that was normal? No. Maybe you misheard me. I said there's a dead body. I need you to send someone. The line was silent for a tense moment before the woman's voice cut back over my phone speaker. Please do not submit a false report again, or you will face legal repercussions. Have a nice day. This isn't a joke! Hello? Hello? My persistence did no good. The operator hung up on me. So what'd they say? Are they sending someone? Jacob asked, gazing up at me expectantly. No, actually, I said, lowering the phone from my ear. They told me nothing was wrong. I was left in complete shock for the remainder of the day. If the police wouldn't take me seriously, that left me little choice but to go home and try to erase it from my memory. But I just couldn't. The image of that woman's lifeless corpse was permanently seared into my brain. I felt like I owed it to her to find justice, or at the very least, someone to give her a proper burial. Grayson, dinner! Mom shouted. I'll be there in a second, I yelled back, gently placing the last of the freshly laid eggs into my basket. The one good thing about being an involuntary farmhand? It helped keep my mind occupied. At least it was good for something. I silently joined my parents at the table. Mom set a plate full of meatloaf and mashed potatoes before me. Normally, I would have demolished it. But in light of what I'd witnessed earlier that day, I didn't know if my appetite would ever come back. Why aren't you eating, honey? You've barely touched your potatoes. Is something wrong? Mom asked, a twinge of concern percolating her words. Yeah, so... This is gonna sound crazy, but... Spit it out, boy, Dad interjected through a mouthful of food. I saw a dead body today. My parents locked eyes with one another. Dad gulped down his food, but he didn't motion to take another bite. Mom stared silently at him, sweat beading on her brow. That was probably nothing. Just a leftover display from Halloween. Mom chuckled nervously. Your mother is right, Dad affirmed, flashing me a toothy grin. It was probably just a figment of your imagination. No need for concern. The fork trembled in his grasp as he stabbed a slab of meatloaf. Don't worry about finishing dinner. You can be excused if you're not hungry, Mom said, that anxious smile still plastered to her face. Thanks. I'm gonna take you up on that offer. I scooted my chair out from the table and returned to my duties. I didn't want to spend any more time around my folks that evening. They were acting strange, and I didn't like it one bit. Trepidation bubbled in my gut as Jacob and I walked to school. The trip was marred by a tense, uneasy silence. Then Jacob said what was on both of our minds. Grayson, do you think she'll still be there? I sure hope not, I said, keeping my eyes locked to the ground. We each subconsciously held our breaths as we approached the clearing. I prayed that the woman would be gone. My heart palpitated wildly in my chest, blood rushing in my ears. I clenched my eyes shut as we came into view. And there it was. A grass clearing sat before us. Daisies and dandelions swayed among the lush green blades. I peered beyond it, into the trees. I suddenly grew lightheaded. She was still there. The woman's lifeless, decaying corpse hung from the rope, those horrible, unblinking eyes visible even from our distance. I felt like I was going to be sick. The cops had completely ignored my call. Without warning, Jacob took off in a dead sprint. I gave chase, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. We ran and ran, all the way until we'd reached the school. I didn't even need to ask Jacob why he'd done it. I was probably going to do the same eventually. I couldn't focus for the remainder of the day. The hands on the clock seemed to tick by in slow motion. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Those bulging, desperate eyes. I couldn't escape them. After the longest day of my life, I again found myself by Jacob's side, walking home. We didn't say anything to each other. We just kept going, dreading the encounter that we knew would come. We gradually approached the clearing. I couldn't do it. Not again. But I had to. It was like a train wreck. Something so demented and screwed up that you just can't bring yourself to look away. "All right, man. I'm going to run the rest of the way. Your call if you want to come with," Jacob said, already turning away from me. "Go ahead. I'll join you in a sec," I muttered, wondering if I was making the right decision. "Suit yourself," Jacob retorted, averting his gaze from the field before jogging past. This was it. The last time. One more look. Then I'd never peer into those woods again. I was done. That's what I told myself, at least. I steeled my resolve and quickly glanced at the tree that I'd previously seen the woman hanging from. I immediately regretted it. I bent over and lost my lunch all over the dried leaves littering the ground, because when I glanced up at that tree, the woman wasn't alone. There was a man dangling from the branch opposite her, connected to the bough from an almost identical noose. His eyes mirrored the woman's. Two fear-struck, bloodied orbs jutting from his head, congealed, viscous liquid oozing down his neck. I couldn't take it any longer. I sprinted after Jacob and didn't stop until I reached my house. What was going on? Were the cops working with a serial killer? Even if they were, why wouldn't they at least come pick up the bodies? Fortunately, I'd never received the answer to some of those questions. Some, but not all. It didn't stop with those two. Bodies began appearing in trees at an alarming rate, and they weren't just confined to the clearing anymore. The dead were popping up everywhere. In the big oak by the library, in the maple tree in front of town hall. Hell, a dead man even showed up hanging from the beech tree on the school's front lawn. Only once was it ever anyone I recognized. I knew Kent Taylor. He was the owner of a little diner off Main Street. He was one of the nicest men I'd ever met. Needless to say, when his body appeared swinging from a rope on my walk home, I burst into tears. He didn't deserve that. None of them did. I desperately wanted to get to the bottom of the whole thing. But what could I do? No one was willing to talk about it, and the police were utterly useless. I tried to contact them multiple times, but in the end, I was given a warning for submitting a false report. I was caught between a rock and a hard place. So, left with seemingly no other option, I turned a blind eye. Obviously, I was terrified beyond belief, but I think we all were. Everyone seemed on edge, like we were all anticipating something that none of us wanted to acknowledge. Time marched slowly by, agonizingly so. Each day felt longer than its predecessor. Still, after what seemed like an eternity, the day finally came. Jacob's graduation. A whirlwind of emotions swirled within me as I sat and watched my classmates walk across the stage. Huge, content grins were plastered across their faces, the light in their eyes burning brightly. It should have been me up there accepting my diploma. It wasn't fair that all my peers got to escape this hellhole, while I was forced to endure for another year. It just wasn't. I waved as Jacob accepted his diploma from the dean. He beamed back at me, not a worry in the world. Though jealousy burned inside me like a hot iron, I managed to suppress it. I wish so badly that I could have adopted Jacob's same carefree attitude even just for a moment. Now I'm not so sure. Once the ceremony was complete, I swam through the crowd to meet my friend. Just a quick congratulations, and I'd be on my way. No point in sticking around any longer. "Jacob, congrats, buddy," I said, clasping him on the shoulder. He reciprocated my greeting with a warm smile. "Thank you, Gray. I really appreciate you coming. I would have understood if you wanted to stay home. And have to pick up crusty cow patties? Hell no. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Jacob chuckled, his grin growing even wider. Even if I was consumed by envy, that didn't make me any less proud of him. really does mean a lot to me. More than you know. Heck, I might even miss this place a little because of you, he quipped, drawing a smile to my own face. I lightly slugged him in the arm. Oh, who are you kidding? You and I both know that won't happen. Remind me again. Where are you running off to this summer? Landed an internship at Prentice Financial. I'll be going to Boston for the next couple months, remember? Ah, yeah, I do remember you telling me that now. Live it up for the both of us, man. And try not to forget about me, okay? It's gonna be real lonely around here without you, you know? Me? Forget about you? Wouldn't dream of it, he said, shooting me a wink. 2 weeks from that day, Jacob was scheduled to fly out. I didn't get to see him off, but I wished him the best. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. Not until he started ignoring my texts. I thought that maybe he'd just been busy with the move. I mean, it's stressful to leave the place you've called home for your entire life and start anew. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, though. I should have listened to my gut. It was another 3 days before I found him. Dad had sent me to the corner store to pick up some salt when I happened to glance up at the tree, overshadowing the old-timey little shop. I will never forget what I saw. Jacob's lifeless corpse stared back at me. His eyes bulged from his skull, and tiny rivulets of dried blood streamed down his cheeks. My heart shattered and simultaneously began to race in my chest. Jacob, my best friend in the entire world, was strung up like a puppet, and not a single soul acknowledged him. I dropped to my knees and wept. I cried and cried, ignoring strange looks from passers-by. It wasn't right. Jacob never hurt a fly. He didn't deserve to die. Not like that. I stood back up with a newfound rage bubbling within me. I was going to find out who did this to him, and I was going to make them pay. I abandoned the salt on the sidewalk. I didn't care what Dad would say. He could get his own damn salt if he needed it so badly. I continued on my warpath, straight to the only place that I knew I could find some answers. Jacob's house. I knocked furiously on the front door, anger simmering over all the while. Jacob's parents would tell me something. They had to. Jacob's mother answered the door. Her eyes were puffy and sullen, like she'd been crying for days on end. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Her only son was brutally murdered, and the police didn't give two shits about it. That extinguished my ear, just a bit. Mrs. Allen, please don't blow me off. I need to know. Who did this to him? And why? Tears began to cloud my vision. The reality of my grim discovery still hadn't fully set in. Did what? To whom? She replied. Her voice was defeated and hoarse. She was hiding something. You know who? Jacob. Your son. I found his body by the corner store. Please, Mrs. Allen. Please tell me who did this. Jacob? No, Jacob is in Boston. He's an intern. My boy is doing just fine, she replied despondently, staring into space. Jacob is not fine. Please, you have to. It was nice of you to stop by, Grayson. Tell your parents we said hello. And with that, the door shut in my face. It's been 2 days since then. I have a theory, and I'm going to test it. I have to know. For Jacob's sake. I think whoever is doing this is killing anyone who tries to leave. So tonight, I'm going to find out for myself if that's true. I've got a cousin who lives in a major city. She said it's okay if I crash at her place for a while. Either I'm going to get out of here or I'm going to die trying. I'm going to take Dad's pickup truck and pray that it doesn't give out on me. I'm posting this in case I don't make it out. Please heed my warning. If you drive through a town called Walnut Valley in northern Kentucky, don't stick around. Because if you do, you might not make it out alive.